Well, welcome, folks. The Democrats are desperate. They're desperate because they're getting ready to lose control of the judiciary. This has been their stomping grounds for so many years. So many laws have been passed, or rulings have been passed by the United States Supreme Court that has upended the social life of America. And now the left is in danger of losing it. So they've pulled out all the stops to discredit one of the best judges in America, Brett Kavanaugh. And not only has one allegation surfaced, now there's something else in the New Yorker. Well, we'll have more about that today and tell you what my take on it is at this moment. Terry?
Well, the top Democrat on the committee is already asking for a delay in the hearing that was being set up for this week about the previous allegation against Kavanaugh. Amber Strong brings us the story from Washington.
Just as Senate Republicans were reaching a compromise with one woman accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, news of a second allegation. According to this report in The New Yorker, 53-year-old Deborah Ramirez says Kavanaugh exposed himself and caused her to touch his bare genitals when the two were freshmen at Yale. Ramirez says she was hesitant to come forward, saying she, Kavanaugh, and others at the party were heavily intoxicated at the time. But, quote, after 6 days of carefully assessing her memories and consulting with her attorney, she felt confident enough of her recollections. That has some critics raising questions. The New Yorker report highlights various people who Ramirez says were there when the incident happened. One person Ramirez says egged Kavanaugh on denies even remembering the party. Another male classmate Ramirez says was involved says he doesn't remember it. And others who knew Kavanaugh closely as a freshman also dispute her story. Still, others support her claims and her credibility. Kavanaugh flat out denies the incident, saying the allegations are a smear, plain and simple. This comes just one day after Senate Republicans reached a tentative deal to have Kavanaugh's first accuser, Christine Ford, testify before the Senate Judiciary Thursday. Even if he's confirmed, some Senate Democrats are hinting at impeaching Kavanaugh.
I know that Maryland has eliminated the statute of limitations for kidnapping and for sexual assault of a minor. And I think that is still out there. And so there may be an investigation along those lines.
Senator Hirono, who'd previously spoken against the culture of complacency in the face of sexual harassment, stated it's time for men to shut up and step up. But one Republican senator who had questions for Kavanaugh's first accuser took issue with that statement.
I am not going to shut up, with all due respect. When I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan, nobody on the other side told me to shut up. They told me how fair I was, how good I was.
Now, the White House is standing by Kavanaugh in a statement issued late Sunday night saying this is nothing more than a smear campaign by the Democrats. Now the issue becomes how the Senate Judiciary will handle these new allegations. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Well, folks, there's so much at stake here. You see, if the Democrats can get away with this, a man as distinguished as Kavanaugh, he's one of the most brilliant minds in the judiciary in America. His cases have been cited by the Supreme Court on multiple occasions. He is a brilliant scholar, brilliant jurist, and is right down the line with the Constitution. So this is the kind of person we want on the Supreme Court. But what do the Democrats do? They can't stand the thought that a person of his quality would be a Supreme Court judge. But look, here's the deal. If they can upend this thing, then they know they can bring these charges against anybody else. An unproven thing of somebody that says, well, when I was 15, he did this to me, and that was 30 years ago. Who ever heard of such nonsense? Who ever heard of impeaching somebody because he was, 16 to 17 years old and did something? What are they going to start doing? But this means every single candidate that the president puts up for the Supreme Court will have the same kind of lynching, if you will, and we cannot permit it. Now, when Clarence Thomas went up, he was dealing with the Democrat Senate, but nevertheless, Anita Hill came and said, all these things about the nasty stuff that he said, and he was sexually harassing and so forth and so on. Clarence Thomas still got confirmed, but now the Senate's in the hand of the Republicans, but just barely. Now, in the Judiciary Committee, it's a razor-thin margin, and one of the members is a guy named Jeff Flake, who is a senator from Arizona. He just hates President Trump, and it's questionable whether he would vote for Kavanaugh or whether he would vote against him. Now, if the Senate Judiciary Committee votes against Kavanaugh, it won't look good. But the chairman has the privilege, if he so chooses, listening to this woman who's going to be testifying on Thursday, listening to Kavanaugh, that he can refer it directly to the United States Senate, where Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, says, I can get it through. There will probably be a couple of Democrats, such as Joe Manchin and others, who might vote for Kavanaugh, which would put him over, and he would be confirmed by the Senate. But if he goes in with a negative vote from the Judiciary Committee, it will not look good on the other way. So I think they'll hold that up. But the thing is, this is so important not to allow this kind of a smear to take place against worthy candidates. And it's been a circus. The people, by the way, who've been complaining up there and disrupting these proceedings, that happens to be a federal crime. And I think that the Justice Department should prosecute those people to the full extent of the law. They literally should go to jail and know you cannot come into a Senate hearing and behave the way you've behaved in order to disrupt the deliberations of the United States Senate. The Senate has a certain amount of dignity. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is crucial to the ongoing blessing of the United States of America. And I think every person in this audience ought to be in prayer that the Lord will take charge of these matters and bring something successfully to conclusion. But we cannot allow a few people to smear worthy candidates for the federal bench with the kind of stuff that's been going on. It's been a circus, it's been a disgrace, and it's a disgrace to a great country to have this kind of thing happen. And it's time it should shut down. But it'll only be shut down if the members of the judiciary and the members of the United States Senate will live up to their obligations under the Constitution, and especially the Republicans need to stand firm and not be scared. You remember we had a man named Bill Clinton who did horrible things. He did outrageous things with an intern in the Oval Office, and he got away with it. He was under impeachment for things that he had done, but yet the Senate cleared him. And although he himself was guilty of contempt by a federal judge and had his license to practice law taken away from him, the Democrats still rallied around him. And I think it's time for the Republicans to stand up and be counted. Well, in other news, President Trump is facing another big decision, whether or not he cleans up the Justice Department and fires Rod Rosenstein. Ephraim Graham has that story.
Pat, senior Republicans are advising President Donald Trump to go slow on making a decision about firing Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. The question has come up after a New York Times report Rosenstein suggested to now former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe to wear a wire when meeting the president. He also suggested removing the president from office. Senator Lindsey Graham and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes are cautioning against firing Rosenstein for now. They say the president should not fire him unless he believes he is lying. President Trump has also spoken with his outside network of advisors, but most people have reportedly been in favor of not firing Rosenstein. Vice President Mike Pence is warning evangelicals to not be complacent during this year's midterm elections. He shared that message this weekend at the Family Research Council's Voter Values Summit. Pence said the other side is mobilized and that faith voters must match and surpass their enthusiasm. He added the midterm elections are, quote, choice between a party that celebrates America and one that demeans millions of our neighbors and friends. President Trump is traveling to the United Nations this week. He'll address the General Assembly Tuesday and chair the Security Council Wednesday. The president's UN trip will come after he recently cut funding to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. That is the UN body responsible for Palestinian refugees. While there has been an uproar over that decision, critics of UNRWA point to its education system. They say it could be encouraging a new generation of terrorists. Chris Mitchell brings us a look at those claims.
This lady with a Palestinian scarf appears harmless, right?
But who is this? Dalal al-Mughrabi, who led a terrorist attack and murdered 38 people, including 13 children, on the coastal road of Israel in 1978.
Her picture appears in the 5th grade Arabic language textbook. It's part of a 4-page lesson that hails Mughrabi as a martyr who painted with her struggle a picture of challenge and heroism.
In these 4 pages, they're praising her and saying what a hero she was and how the younger generation needs to act exactly the same as she did.
Israeli Knesset members Sharon Haskell and David Bedin of the Israel Resource News Agency spoke to journalists about reforms they believe need to happen.
Some of the major problems with UNRWA are perpetuating the hatred and the violence between Palestinians and Israelis.
CBN News asked UNRWA about the textbooks and education system. In a written statement, spokesman Christopher Gunnis told us UNRWA teaches in accordance with UN values and principles. By convention, we teach the curriculum of host countries, i.e. the PA curriculum in the occupied territory. We review every book we use. We check for gender bias, age appropriateness, and political neutrality. On average, we found less than 3% of the pages we have reviewed to be problematic. There are 515,000 Palestinian children in the UNRWA school system. Bedin says that if just 2% take up the challenge to terrorism each year, that would create more than 10,000 terrorists. Bedin sees other issues with UNRWA.
UNRWA, as a policy, teaches the concept of the right of return by force of arms.
That so-called right of return is also exaggerated by the very definition of Palestinian refugees.
UNRWA's got a completely different refugee definition than any other international organization. In UNRWA, a refugee status can be inherited, which means that they do not fulfill their basic agenda for what they were created for.
Haskell and Bedin hope that President Trump's action to cut funding will force UNRWA to make changes. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And many are hoping for those changes. Pat?
You know, ladies and gentlemen, after that Six-Day War, the 1948, actually not the Six-Day War, but 1948, the Arab nations attacked the fledgling state of Israel just at its inception. And what they did, they told their people, leave your homes because we're going to attack that area. And as soon as we are in control, you can then come back into your homes. Well, now what happened was they tried to destroy the Jewish state, but they failed. And Israel beat them back, beat back the Arab armies. Now, these so-called refugees were taken over by the United Nations, this UNRWA, which is a UN public works,
Relief works.
relief organization. It's got a strange name. And they have held these people ever since. That's almost 50-some years ago. And they've held them in perpetual bondage. They keep them in refugee camps, and they keep telling them, you have a right to return. You and your families have a right to go back and get that land that you abandoned when your Arab buddies tried to destroy the state of Israel. And that, of course, is a fiction that cannot sustain. They will not allow these people to be free. They keep them in this bondage. And they get millions of dollars from the United Nations. And as Chris Mitchell showed you, the kind of propaganda they're putting out is outrageous. Now, President Trump very bravely said America is no longer going to supply the money to UNRWA. And they cut off $350 million. It was a brilliant move. and one that goes along with putting the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. Now, this is the kind of thing that we need to show the leftists who are running the State Department that we're not going to put up with this anymore, and it's time we take a stand against the United Nations. I think the UN has outlived its usefulness. We need a community of democratic nations, not just a group of despots coming together. And the General Assembly has just been a joke because they vote consistently against America and consistently against Israel. It's unbelievable, and the stuff that they get away with. Why should we, American taxpayers, be asked to fund that kind of nonsense? Well, the president has said no more in this regard, and we congratulate him for that. And we also congratulate him in the fact that our UN ambassador is a former governor of South Carolina. She is doing a fabulous job representing America, and Ephraim has that story.
Pat, America's United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley has a message for Iran. The United States is not to blame for a terrorist attack this weekend on Iran on an annual military parade. Iran's President Rouhani blamed the United States, but Haley said on CNN he should look at the problems in his own country first.
He needs to look at his own home base. He's got the Iranian people are protesting. Every ounce of money that goes into Iran goes to his military. He has oppressed his people for a long time, and he needs to look at his own base to figure out where that's coming from. I think the Iranian people have had enough, and that's where all of this is coming from. But having said that, he can blame us all he wants. The thing he's got to do is look in the mirror.
Haley also said Iran's economy is plummeting after President Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal earlier this year. Regent University is now among the top 11% of universities in the country. That is according to U.S. News and World Report, which ranks 1,800 schools nationwide. It is the highest ranking for the school in its 40-year history. The National Universities category includes top Ivy League schools and other universities like William & Mary, as well as Virginia Tech. Pat?
Well, I want to tell you, I'm so thrilled. I congratulate the staff and the deans at Regent University for this signal honor. It really is important to be listed as one of the top national universities in America, top 11% of all the universities. And the university is growing dramatically. The increase is dramatic. And the new courses in healthcare and nursing and cybersecurity have been just cutting edge. So if you're interested, it's the number you can call. It's 866-910-7615. Regent University, America's preeminent Christian university.
That's quite an honor.
It is an honor. It's just one more thing. The NSA has listed Regent as a center of academic excellence in cybersecurity. That just came down. And now to see this honor and to see also the School of Nursing, which is a part of the College of Healthcare Sciences, just booming. I'm just thrilled. The way God is blessing that university is wonderful. So, again, if you're interested, enrollment takes place kind of all the time. I mean, you can sign up about every month. You can enroll. So it's a beautiful campus and a lovely place and a very, very happy student body. Well, there was tragedy that took place south of here, and it's called Florence, and the devastation is estimated somewhere between $35 and $50 billion, but it's more tragedy than that. Ephraim.
That Hurricane Florence brought high winds and heavy rains. It also toppled a big tree across Diane Turner's yard. Diane couldn't do anything about the tree on her own. Thankfully, she didn't have to because she received some help from Operation Blessing.
When Hurricane Florence hit Lumberton, North Carolina, Diane Turner and her family couldn't sleep for days.
Because I've never had insomnia, but I didn't sleep for several days there, several nights. My husband didn't sleep in bed that night. He said, we can't, those trees are likely to fall. And the wind was fierce.
In the middle of the night, a tree came crashing down.
It sounded like a big boom.
They went out in the morning to find a pretty big tree across the yard. Diane couldn't do anything about it on her own. She's been taking care of her 90-year-old mother-in-law, who had to be evacuated from her nursing home. They didn't know what to do about the tree. Then, Operation Blessing showed up. We got right to work cutting the tree apart into manageable pieces to be hauled off. I grabbed one of the saws myself. Diane was grateful not only for the help we gave her, but for what we've been doing for thousands of hurricane victims in North Carolina.
I've seen Jesus in the work that y'all are doing, and God's hand on you there. East Lumberton Baptist Church, I see it on the TV or the Facebook, and that y'all would come this distance to do something for people that you don't even know speaks well of all of you.
Once we took care of the tree at Diane's, the crew packed up and got ready for the next job. Before we left, we prayed with Diane and her mother-in-law.
I will pray for all of you, because it's a good thing you're doing. Thank you with all our hearts. Thank you for everything you've done.
And thank you for making that possible. Pat?
Well, Operation Blessing, by the way, it's got emergency relief, bottled water, hot meals, shower traveler, and we've helped so many people and have given billions of dollars, and I use that term advisedly, billions of dollars in aid throughout the world. And here at home, Operation Blessing is on the scene wherever there's a disaster. Our team comes in, our wonderful volunteers come in. And if you want to get involved, again, Operation Blessing is 1-800-700-7000, Disaster Relief Fund. And we're not quitting, by the way. Those floodwaters are actually still rising in some of those rivers. And so down in South Carolina particularly, there's still a real problem.
Oh, I mean, houses are still completely covered, except the peak of the I mean, you can't even imagine. They haven't been able to even get in and begin to get rid of all of the waterlogged stuff that's in the house or begin repairs. But relief efforts in North Carolina are ongoing, and Operation Blessing needs your help. This is how. They'll be accepting volunteers at the Without Limits Christian Center. The address of that place is at 102 Washington Post Road. That's in New Bern, North Carolina. That's right in the midst of all that's happening. That begins at 8 a.m. today, Monday through Saturday. And OB will provide everything that you need, including lunch, transportation to the work site. Free housing will be available for out-of-town volunteers, but you have to register in advance. So here's the number to call. It's a toll-free number. It's 1-800-677-7974. That's 1-800-677-7974. Or you can go to ob.org, but they really need help. If you have the ability to volunteer, give them a call, and they would welcome your services.